talking on video. Thank you for meeting with me. And because I like that you're willing to share from the heart, real information that needs, to be heard. And what I hope that we would talk about today was the fact that we know that you're a teacher of all ages, middle, high. I also made another post recently, well, this year, about something else. I was talking about, I don't even remember what I was talking about, but it had something to do with my kids. They're in a new phase of life. When you met them, they were like 4 and 5 years old. Now they're 13 and 14 in the 8th and 9th grade. And they have changed. And so I've been thinking about and listening to some podcasts and things, talking about how to adjust. And you have children. One is about to graduate high school.
Yep, she's 17 and she's a senior, and the other one is a sophomore and she's 15, almost 16. So I'm getting very near the end of the high school experience. But it's been really cool because, this is my 21st year of teaching, but in the last several years, really interesting to teach at the same school that my kids go to. And so I see what I see as a teacher, but then I also hear what they see as students. And as a parent, I hear my kids talk about school, but then as a parent who works in that building, I can see the teachers that they, are struggling in their class, or the other students, or the school policy, or the administration, or the, all the things, because school is like their whole day when they're teenagers. It just consumes everything about them. And to hear them complain about, dress code or whatever it is, and also having sat through the staff meeting where that was addressed, that sort of thing, it's interesting to see both sides. And so it's been eye-opening for me as a parent and as a teacher, on both sides of that, to be able to see the parallels at the same time, and see where things overlap and where things are perceived very differently. And they'll have, a situation with a friend who's also one of my students. And so it's just, to see different sides of an issue. It's like, well, have you tried talking to that person? Have you asked, what have you done? I try not to blur those lines, but I can't cut myself in half. And so I just have to ask a lot of questions, and it's been a good practice for me as a parent to just ask lots of questions, because I can't always, share all the information that I know about the situation, but I can ask some guiding questions. And that then leads into seeing how your children process information and how they make decisions. And, I can't just tell them this is what they should do. Sometimes I do as a parent, but a lot of times I try and just say, well, maybe you could try this approach and see how that works. So yeah, I certainly don't have all the answers, but I'm in a very unique situation where I can see one, situation or example from multiple perspectives, and then kind of see what works and what didn't work. And maybe that will be helpful to other parents. Yeah.
Yeah, you said a couple of things there. Well, you said a lot of things, but one thing I noted was you said you ask a lot of questions, because information from both sides. Let's say in a friendship relationship, that there's some kind of confusion there or miscommunication. So you hear both sides kind of, but you don't involve yourself. So you limit yourself by not involving yourself so much that you're like, hey, well, kind of jumping in to help mend the situation.
And it's hard when, as a parent, you're like, well, I know what the answer is, and if they would just do this thing, it would all be fine. But I can't do that because I'm at work, and I do have my children with me at work, which is very awkward. But I'm in that professional role, and so I have to wait until, a ride home. So I do very much limit how much I can jump in and save them. And I think that's also been challenging at times, but a really good thing for parents is, you want kids to learn how to handle their problems. And it's really hard because we're used to, saving the day when they drop their ice cream cone when they're 4, we buy them another one and we fix it. But as they become teenagers, they really do have to learn how to fix it themselves. And so I try not to, talk to my colleagues until after they have tried talking to them. If they miss something, or if they have to retake a test, or if they were absent or whatever. I mean, kids never get to be absent. It's the problem when your mom's a teacher. You never get to be absent. But if a situation happens, I try and encourage them to handle it. And, way before I ever would make like a formal meeting with that colleague of mine, and I would say, I need to talk to you as a parent. So there's a lot of kind of steps to go through before we get to that. So they have had to fix most of their problems, to the point where some of their friends have said, my mom would be at the school in a minute if that had happened to me. But my kids know that I can't do that. I can't just run into the classroom next door and be like, hey, my child, so they know that I believe that they can fix it. They know that I can give them suggestions, and that I'm going to give them opportunities, and even one opportunity, they know I'm not going to save them after that. They have to work it out, and they can try different things. They can try, approaching with extra kindness. They can try to talk to them, whether it's a student, a classmate, a teacher. But they know that I'm not going to save them until it's like really a huge situation. But otherwise, I'm just not helping them. I won't help them. But I encourage them, and I'll always listen, and I'll always guide them. So that's probably the best thing that parents can do, because when parents save their kids, or the parents are the one emailing about missing work, that sort of thing, and the student's not involved in the conversation, then that's not very helpful. So if the students give the parents the runaround, then yes, I love when those parents contact me. My child says everything's turned in, and yet I see all these missings. What's going on? But if it's, my student's going to be absent today, what are they going to miss? That email should come from the student, that kind of thing. So you want to model good behavior for your kids, and you want to encourage them, and you want to guide them. But really, you have to make them do it. They have to contact their teachers. They have to work through their problems. They need to talk to their friends. Even if it's a bullying or harassment situation, they need to go to the principal or the assistant principal. Like, the kids have to have that ownership of the situation. So that's really helpful if parents can guide their kids in that and encourage them and say, I'm right behind you, but you got to go first, and let the student or the teenager start that conversation with their teacher, their principal, or whatever the situation is. That's my advice.
Say that again.
That's my advice on that situation. Yeah, really encouraging kids to find their own voice and stand up for themselves and to address problems.
Yeah, you said have them lead the way, but the parent is definitely behind them, supporting them, encouraging them, believing that they can handle their problem. But if not, we're right there, listening, asking questions, watching, being involved when that doesn't work, I guess.
Yes. Even things like role playing or giving, kind of examples of what they could say or how to start that conversation. Can I schedule a meeting to talk about such and such? So the parent can be really involved, but the student has to kind of be out front.
Yeah, those are some
definitely
practical examples you just shared, like role play at home, having them practice going to the principal and what they might say, how they would describe the problem. Yeah. But there is a moment, like when you see that they're hurting. It's like, how do you well, I don't know. I guess there's a choice that the parent will have to make at some point. Like, at what point you're going to let them kind of go through that, because we all have to at some point. So I don't have that problem right now personally. We that's not my issue. So I'll just talk about what my issue is, and maybe if somebody has questions after they watch this, and that maybe we can have a follow-up if there's questions. But so for my thing is my struggle is the second thing that I wrote on Facebook. Like I messaged you, hey, I got this. Actually, this has happened. This is what has happened recently. And it's sort of I kind of just let it go. But what happened was my son, who's an artist, well, I call him an artist because I think he's great at art, and he knows he can do art, but he wouldn't, I don't know if he would call himself an artist. Like he's just like, it's just something I do. But he's in art class, and his art teacher sees his work and put his name in to compete for something. And not everyone in the, like we're asked, did everyone get this? And like, no, she chose me from the class. But she wanted him to do like 6 mock-ups by a certain date in order to like sort of see which direction he's going before he puts all this effort. That makes sense. So it seemed like he was interested. He told us so we could give him ideas. And then later on, I asked him, so what did you decide to go with? Like, which mock-ups are you doing? And he said, yeah, I'm not going to do it. I'll apply next year. And I thought, like, what do you mean? Like, like I was just confused. Like, what do you mean? And he said, I mean, they have it every year. I'm just going to do it next year. Like, I'm not going to do it now. And I got mad and kind of blew up a little. We were in the car. But then I just stopped talking. And then I asked my husband to go for a walk, and we walked the block as I vented what I was feeling. And like for me, and then I realized in talking to Daniel, obviously I am an adult, so I see things differently than he does. And
absolutely.
And he is probably looking at it as, this is more work. Like, why do I need to do this anyway? And besides that, as an artist, to put your work out there and have it be judged by somebody, some arbitrary judge, that's that is intimidating. And it's like, why go through that? And so he didn't say all of this, but after I was like, I know. But I also know that in life, not that you have to put yourself out there, but I mean, in order to move ahead in different areas, you're gonna have to take risks. So I don't know. So basically, it boils down to, at what point does a parent, me, continue to push because I can see the value in you doing this anyway, because it could open up. I see possibilities and the value in you going through this experience. It's not about you winning or not. It's just about you doing it. And my husband's point of view at that time was kind of like, hey, your teacher believed in you. She put your name in, and you need to do it, because somebody, I guess it was kind of like somebody else sees this, you do it. So that's another view. I don't know. What are your thoughts as both parent and teacher?
Well, it's definitely a difficult situation because the mom in you wants them to do well and you want to push them, of course. And your husband's absolutely right that, it's more work. And why would he do more work? Do we want our kids to do things just to make other people happy? Do we want them to do things to make them happy? And it is very vulnerable to put your work out there. So I think you've already covered all the topics. So then, you just have to have that conversation with the teenager and say, why don't you want to do it? And here's the perks. And did you think about these things? Maybe you can talk them into it, or maybe you really can't. And so it is a really fine line between being a parent who's encouraging and pushing for their best interests, but also letting them become their own people, because they are not us, which is so hard as a mom, right? Because we were literally connected to this baby at one point, and now they are their own individual people with their own thoughts and ideas. And sometimes those thoughts and ideas are just wrong as far as we're concerned. They made the wrong choice. So yeah, when to step in and when not to. I mean, definitely step in if it's something that is going to be harmful to them, if they're going to do something dangerous or that would really harm them. If it's just a missed opportunity, it gets even more difficult, because then shouldn't you? Maybe see if you can get him to agree to do it next year, where he'll be older and wiser. But if you push them to do something they don't want to do now, they're not going to put their whole heart into it. They're not going to make 6 more pieces at their best effort. So it can just be a battle that's not worth it. So I don't have the answer, but I think you did a lot of things right in telling them how important you thought it was, what an opportunity you thought it was, and then stopping. You know, you got to stop complaining. And I'm just as guilty as the next mom. I tell my kids and kind of get on a bandwagon, then I have to tell myself, okay, I've said all I've got to say. I need to stop talking now. But yeah, give it some time. You know, go for the walk, calm down, and try to see it from their point of view, because teenagers often don't make any sense until you figure out their kind of way of thinking, and then they do have reasons to come to these decisions. As an adult, it's not the decisions that we would do, but they have reasons, and sometimes they give a lot more weight to what their friends think or peer pressure or things that as adults we would say that's ridiculous, but in their world that matters a lot. They're not thinking about paying the bills as a famous artist, you know. They're not worried about that. They're worried about what the cute girl next to him thinks, you know. So yeah, if you can get your teenager to talk with you and talk about those things, and then you can figure out why they're making that decision, and sometimes you can guide them to make a better decision that more aligns to what you want. But then sometimes you just have to respect the fact that they're going to be their own people. That comes to dating too. Sometimes they date just ridiculous people, and you're like, what are you doing? But you have to sort of honor that, and like, oh, I see that, yeah, that is a good quality in that person. That's a quality. You know, yeah, he's very kind, he's a nice boy, he's failing his classes, but yes, he's a nice boy. So it's so hard when it's like, these are not the things I would choose, but we have to honor their choices, and then say, but you know, wouldn't it be great if you dated someone that maybe had a future? Would be great. So, it's so hard. So I guess I can just tell you, you're not alone.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
Wow, yeah, there is value in talking to people who are a little ahead of you in the journey, because we certainly haven't talked about dating at all. So, but yes, that eventually might come, you know, these conversations about that, about relationships, you know, who are you choosing to yoke yourself with is certainly, to me, very important, but to them it's like, you know, I don't know. Or it might be very important to them. It's just they look at things a little differently. I think you understand, and I appreciate that.
And it goes for all things. It's, are they going to put in the extra effort to study for the test, to try and bump up the GPA, to maybe get a scholarship? They're not thinking about that. They're going to just go for whatever they feel like they need for that class. Are they going to try for honor roll? Are they going to try for this? Are they going to, you know, take the time to write the essay for that scholarship? There's so many things that we're like, this is what you should do. And then they're teenagers and they do what they do. You know, they should go out for the team. They should put themselves out there. They should take advantage of all the great opportunities of being young and a teenager. And then they choose things when you're just completely baffled as a parent. And you're like, really? Of all the choices, that's what we went with? Okay. But ultimately, you're trying to teach them to make decisions. So you want to honor their decisions, even if it's a moderately good decision. They made a decision themselves. They had some thought process to it. They're going to stand by that decision. So there's a lot of good that you can take from that. Like, you could compliment your son and say, hey, you did a really good job of thinking about what was important to you, and, you know, standing up for yourself and saying, this is what I want, this is what I don't want, you know, and you should continue to do things that are in your best interest and not just what other people want you to do. Because if you think about it, there's not so much difference between doing things to please a parent and doing things to please friends and peer pressure. So you want a student or a teenager who's a bit stubborn, because then they're going to be who they are and they're going to stand up to their friends too and say, no, I don't want to do that. So you can always kind of find the good in the situation and say, hey, you did a really good job of, standing by what you decided was best for you. And I'm proud of you for that. And maybe next year you could try. Maybe next year we could go out for the art thing. But yeah, so being stubborn, being a teenager who's going to kind of dig in their heels can be a really great quality. Being a risk taker is not always a great quality.
Well, I like how I think as a person that just shared with you a problem, like, and by you taking time to like first listen and then to restate what you heard that I said, like the things that I pointed out and that you picked up on, you told me this is what I heard. And then you tell me, well, this was good that you did these things. Perhaps you could do this or ask them these questions next. And, and then you said, well, consider their point of view. So I can see why it's working for your children, because anyone that feels like, okay, at least they heard me, even though they don't agree, they understand what I'm saying. And even though what they're hoping that I'll do is different than what I'll choose, at least I know that they understood what I'm saying. They understand my perspective. It seems like they understand my perspective. Yeah. So maybe one day I'll consider the advice that they're giving, because at least they understand. And so
that's a really good point, that sometimes they don't do what we want right now, but it doesn't mean that conversation was lost. Like, they hear, and a lot of parents feel like their kids don't hear them, but I will tell you from talking to a lot of kids, they hear their parents. They just don't always react or act immediately, but they hear what's being said. And so that I always thought was really encouraging, because I would tell kids stuff in class, kind of language arts. We talk about a book and I maybe try and give them some life wisdom, and they would say, oh, my mom always says that. Oh, my dad always says that. And I'm like, oh, well, you should listen to them. Like, your parents are really wise. But, they hear it, but they have to maybe make sure that that's true. Or when they hear multiple adults in their life tell them that, then they're more likely to listen. So as a parent, you still want to plant those seeds. They just might not get watered for a while. But it's also great to have, teachers, youth group leaders, coaches. There's a lot of people who can talk to your kids and enforce what you're saying. So even if, when you're living with a teenager, it can be challenging. For everybody, it can be very challenging to live with teenagers. But if they hear it from the parent and then they also hear it from the community, that can be really powerful. And it might take them weeks or months to react in the way you want. Maybe a full year rolls around and the next thing you know, he is going to take a risk. Maybe not even with that situation, but maybe with entering an art contest or a writing contest or some other thing. Or maybe it's in college, he goes out for something. So like that conversation that you had with him in the car is still very, very valuable, even though he might not change his mind right now. Because you listened, you told him how important it was, how much you believe in him, how talented you think he is. So all that's it's still there. Like, he still heard all that. And that's really great.
Well, it's not really great, the method in which I did all that. I was yelling. So now I'm like, but they hear all that and they see all that too. He knows how passionate I am about him doing things. So, and then I thought, you don't want to react this way. He's the one that decided to say, I'm not going to do, he could have just not told me, so do I really want to shut down communication because I'm like overreacting because he said something that he knew I probably wouldn't like? So I don't want to shut down communication. I of course want to continue where he can tell me things that are difficult for me to hear, I still want him to talk to me. And so I got to control how I react to some things that they say, because I want them to continue to talk to me. I am listening. So
that's so true. As parents, we're growing as parents. As they're growing as teenagers, we're growing. And so I'll just speak for myself. I get it wrong a lot, and I overreact sometimes, or, I give them my soapbox while we're in the car and they can't escape, that's usually where we do most of our talking. So yeah, I mean, as parents, it's high stress. You've invested so much in these children, and they're starting to make decisions for themselves that we don't always agree with. So yeah, I mean, you have to give yourself a little bit of grace. Maybe it's not the way you want to react next time, but you cared, and you were talking to him, and you were passionate about his well-being, and he'll remember that. They tend to remember the best parts of childhood. So even if we're not always at our A game or our very best performance, or what we would want maybe the neighborhood to see, our kids know we love them, and that's what's really important. So he'll forgive your volume maybe in the car.
Yeah. Yeah, they will. They pick up on the underlying, do you care for me or not? Do you love me or not? So I think you're right. They do know and sense that. And like how I think anybody can hear this conversation and sense that you are very encouraging to your children from what you're saying, but also to me, like as in this conversation, quick to point out, well, don't beat yourself up too much, because you've done these things. So it's like, okay, thank you for pointing that out. And so I can definitely see how you would do that in a relationship with your children. Yeah, what great modeling.
Life is hard. Life is very hard, and everyone's doing the best they can. And even when I talk to kids, to my students, I tell them that same message. Your parents are doing the best they can. You don't know what all they're dealing with their work and finances and marriage and all of that. Like, your parents are doing the best they can. You're doing the best you can as a teenager, and it might not be perfect. You might not have perfect grades or that kind of thing, but like, life is messy. We're all just doing the best we can, because it's messy. Being human is messy. But I think if your heart's in the right place, your kids know that.
Mm-hmm. What a benefit for your students to hear another adult say, hey, your parents really, they're doing the best that they can. They're learning how to be parents. All of these comments that you have. I mean, wow, what a blessing that your students get to hear that from another adult. Because I'm sure they're saying that. Maybe the parents are saying that, but you don't believe them. Like, yeah, whatever. But right. To have another adult in their life sort of affirm, like, yeah, I'm a parent. I don't do everything right all the time. I'm trying, like I'm trying. Wow, what a gift that they may not know that they have in you. Wow. I remember when I was growing up, I assumed that my parents knew what they were doing. Like, I assumed that they were making, like they had a plan and they were making these choices. But now that I'm an adult, I know they did not know what they were doing. Like, they were just, like you saying, doing the best that they can with what they had going on, with the finances, like you mentioned, that they have going on, with the fact that they had two, kids who were about to enter college age at the same time, and like having to think about that, having to think about retirement at that time, like all of these things that I just thought, oh, like, what you're doing. Like, why are we in this situation? I'm thinking, but now I like, oh, wow. So I apologize to my parents sometimes when I talk to them, like, yeah, I get it now. I didn't get it there. I thought I got it. I thought I knew at that time. But now that I'm older and in the situation, I see, yeah, I didn't know as much as I thought I knew.